This podcast, Strange, Rare, and Peculiar, is for kind of those in the know about homeopathy, deepening your knowledge, bringing you more information about what you need to know and maybe what you can leave aside about homeopathy.
Homeo what?
Homeo what?
Hello, hello, hello.
Oh, hello. Are we actually recording?
A good morning, good afternoon, and good evening.
And all of those things.
All of those things at once. And have you heard about the blob?
The blob.
The blob.
Honestly, I think I keep talking to you about the blob because I love the way you say blob. Can you just say it one more time?
Blob.
We're
blob,
talking about,
blob.
I just got back from Florida from visiting
Blob.
my dad and
The seaweed blob.
I was reading, there was a lot of seaweed on the beach, and I was reading about the 5,000-mile blob of seaweed making its way to the Florida coast. But that wasn't what we were planning to talk about today.
No. I want to talk about home dentistry and the
reason why it really never caught on. I think it's a really worthwhile conversation.
We've got our beverages.
We've got our beverages. We have two different beverages. Al has mud. Oh, the reason we got to the blob was because I made Al a cup of mud. Mud being one of those hippie coffee, replacements with mushrooms and cacao and, all the things. And our immersion blender is on the fritz. And so I had to stir it with a spoon, which anybody who's rassled some cacao in a cup knows that it likes to sink. But if you don't stir it, what it likes to do is come on top like a blob. And that's where we got to there. But
I like it.
Yeah, I like it too.
That kind of joins all of the current issues.
Does it?
Yeah. So
you might have to connect those dots for me. It's not really obvious. But one of the things we want to talk about today is home dentistry. And the reason why it really never caught on, even during the pandemic, when, people were doing a lot of DIY. You remember when you cut my hair?
Oh, my God. The hollering?
Oh, there was no hollering. Maybe you were hollering.
Well, when you saw what I'd done.
Well, it was, hair grows, and the pandemic went on, and I gave Al the kitchen scissors because it was in the summertime and my hair was too long. I said, just cut it off. But he cut off about a foot. I think I should have donated it. Anyway, but in terms of DIY dentistry, so, there's the sort of the home teeth whitening trays. Yeah. There's, like Invisalign, it's not totally a home thing, but I think that there's some orthodontic things that you can do. Clean your teeth? At home. I mean, there's probably one of those Sonic Care or something. But at the end of the day, when it comes to, sort of the drilling, the controversial procedure of a root canal, maybe pulling a tooth.
Getting a crown.
I don't know. There's some things best left to the professionals, in my opinion.
Sure, but the point you're making, because we've just done this video, is that...
Which was kind of ridiculous.
If you need... Well, especially because you kept on putting my outdoor wire cutters in my mouth.
I was using... So to demonstrate the ridiculousness of home dentistry, if you didn't happen to see the video on Instagram, I was using a butter knife, an iPhone, and some wire cutters to demonstrate the ways in which DIY sort of dentistry, with the attempt to make the leap to DIY home medicine, is, there's a limitation. Like, I'm all about the teeth whitening trays.
Right.
I don't think that there's a problem with that. That's kind of like home care for a bee sting, or a kid who's teething. I mean, I think that, homeopathy for the home prescriber, there's one of the most amazing things about homeopathy is how one can learn the basics in a really short time and be able to, help your family, using arnica and aconite and chamomilla and so forth. I think that's a good thing.
I do, but I wonder about, where's the, is it the boring stuff of education that makes a school a school? Is it where
No, I don't think so.
No, but I mean, what I'm saying is that, what's the difference between a support group on Facebook or Signal or Telegram or something?
Well, hold on. You have to. Sorry, I had to walk away and let a cat out. So you're getting into the conversation without context, right? So the context is that we've been having to ask ourselves some questions because we've had people kind of roll up to AHE looking to quote unquote supplement their prior learning, which I don't know. I always have respect for people's prior learning, and I think that's great. And I can't believe sort of how the amount of books people amass for their love of homeopathy. I think it's amazing. But there also has been a permission structure in homeopathy that has given people this idea that you can perform home spleen surgery or deconstruct chronic disease. And, if we're ever going to really sort of get back into medical care and really make changes, systemic medical changes to the delivery of healthcare and well care, we've got to get clear about the fact that while you can learn the foundational basics of things, going out and hanging a shingle and saying that you are a practitioner is something that it comes with liability. And I don't put this on the people themselves who are doing this, because I don't think that a really curious mom who has seen an amazing turnaround in their child's disposition or symptom picture from the use of one homeopathic remedy. I mean, we all have seen those incredible things, and then you become curious, and there's something that is so profound about homeopathy that once you're sort of into it, it becomes like an addiction, and it's pretty awesome.
No, I totally agree.
Right?
But what I'm thinking about is that the difference is that the creation, the development, and the personal development of a homeopath is accompanied by, I would say, social science knowledge, therapeutic relationship information, and that
legalities and liabilities.
The law and ethics.
And also the risk factors. I mean, you sort of can't have it both ways. You can't talk about homeopathy as a medical modality capable of unraveling the deepest level of chronic disease and say you can give it out with impunity and not have any, and have everything turn out just the way you want it. Right? I mean, it's shocking to me. And this isn't just in the consumer realm. I mean, I got an email this week, and it was, I count every day. I think I've said this on the podcast. I count every day how many offers for free homeopathy education I get before 10 a.m. And the average number is 7 or 8. It's somewhere 7 or 8 seems to be around the average. And there is a homeopath who's a doctor who in fact, I'm glad I don't remember their name, but they profess to miraculously, resolve deep chronic issues with one remedy. Like they've discovered some secret. You and I, we presented at a conference with this person, so you'll remember who I might be talking about. But I'm like, okay, that
was code, by the way.
That was code. That's just not realistic, right? What's realistic is that what Hahnemann put to paper and put to the test and sort of put together over the course of a long and illustrious career was a system of medicine based on the laws of nature, that when those laws are adhered to, when there's fidelity to his system, then the outcomes that are available are sometimes kind of miraculous. I mean, you probably feel that way too, right? With over 30 years in it, you're still going like, oh my gosh, this stuff really works, right? But it's both. I think there's a simple elegance to it that you can learn the very basics. I think the beauty is you can learn the very foundational basics for home care in a very short time, and I think that should be available to everyone.
Yeah.
And I think the complexities of the reality of what what chronic care looks like needs to be acknowledged and examined and respected, right? Otherwise, it's like home dentistry. There's a risk.
Yeah. And I think about all that, that yummy educational stuff, moderation, learning outcomes.
You're going back to that again.
I can't not, because,
Yeah.
and that's actually, it's not unimportant.
Well, and performance feedback. I mean, you think about it, like if we just use AHG's clinic as an example, our students see a minimum of 100 cases. And in that, you're working, like I just got an email or a Slack about a student who wrote to the second supervisor I was working with in clinic yesterday saying they loved the group participation where they can work together and then show their work and get feedback on their work in real time so that they can build skills, right? So in a clinical setting, you've got a case, and if you're working, like if you're really learning homeopathy, you need to see sort of what works, what doesn't work, and you need to see over time. And there are so many complex moves that have to be made that are built around this philosophy. So this student who gave a shout out to the ways in which we set up our clinic, where the students get to work independently and then we give them feedback and share knowledge from, dozens of years of experience and trial and error, that's really important.
I don't like it when you put those pliers in my mouth.
You know what? I didn't get to finish something, though. What I was saying is just before, when you were getting into the educational speak that you like, which I love.
No, you don't.
Okay, whatever. But I like. I like it. I'm glad you do it because it's not my skill set. But what I was saying, though, is that I want to be clear that for people who have been sort of doing their own thing and who have been sort of, practicing homeopathy on their friends and family, and I'm not talking about a kid with, an ear infection, with an earache or teething or a bee sting. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about folks who are collecting money for basically what is the provision of medical services without experience because they've been given permission. Like, I feel like our community gives permission, by having Instagram posts telling you all the remedies for X, Y, and Z, some of which, if you're not experienced, could be, treating somebody who maybe has an underlying condition or treating someone's mental health. Somebody who has test anxiety and you give a deep remedy and you're thinking this is just going to help them to take a final exam, when in reality there could be an implication for their deeper chronic picture. It's like you can't blame the person who's been given the okay or the implied consent to go forward and do that. Do you think?
I don't. I think it's a lack of leadership, quietly.
Yeah. So I don't want anybody to take from this that we're saying don't do something that you've already done. Although I guess if you feel that way, you've already tuned us out, for which I apologize, right? Because I didn't get to finish that statement. That was not meant to be, kind of an indictment of people and what they're doing, but rather sort of a call for all of us to take it seriously so that we can raise the bar together. I think we can all do it together because it's like, what's the 100th monkey? You know that idea, the 100th monkey?
I've heard about it a gazillion times, or 98 times, but I don't know what it is. Well, I actually have forgotten what it is.
So I always explain it, and I'm sure convinced that I explain it wrong. So it's good I have my little phone here. I know it involves monkeys.
The last thing you looked up was the blob.
The blob I looked up. 100th monkey effect. Mm-hmm. The 100th monkey effect is a hypothetical phenomenon in which a new idea or behavior is spread rapidly by unexplained means from one group to all. Okay, that's fine, but I want the story about the monkeys and the sweet potato.
That's the diffusion of innovation theory, of which I know quite a bit.
I know you do. You reference that quite a lot. I love the big words.
Well, they're not big words. Diffusion, it's 3 syllables. But diffusion of innovations is a theory, a model of how information or a new idea is picked up in a different culture. Yeah. And it started with an anthropologist in South America that had, it was a horticulturalist that had a really good new type of crop. And what they were trying to do was introduce this new seed into a local valley, agricultural community. And at the same time, this guy was watching why there was resistances and how there were resistances to the diffusion of this new idea, and developed this theory. There are innovators and there are laggards. There's early majority and late majority. And there's a bit in the middle, the bell-shaped curve. And it's an amazingly simple theory, but it works for everything. It works, actually it doesn't work for everything, but the way in which a classroom learns, the way in which a teacher learns a new technology, the way in which, information sprites.
But does it translate to monkeys and sweet potatoes?
Got nothing to do with monkeys and sweet potatoes.
Between 1952 and 1953, primatologists conducted a behavioral study of a group of macaca fushata Japanese monkeys on the island of Kojima. The researchers would supply these troops with such foods as sweet potatoes and wheat in open areas, often on beaches. The unanticipated byproduct of the study was that the scientists witnessed several innovative evolutionary behavioral changes by the troop. Okay, so basically what happened was some of the monkeys learned to wash their sweet potatoes.
Wash them.
Yeah, and they were able to remove the sand and the grit because these sweet potatoes were on the beach. And so the potato washing spread throughout this group of monkeys. Mm-hmm. And so the way that this idea of the 100th monkey came to be was that at a certain point, this sociologist Watson, he concluded that the researchers observed that once a critical number of monkeys was reached, for example, the 100th monkey, previously learned behavior instantly spread across the water to monkeys on nearby islands.
Well, that's sheldrake.
And it's also like Jung, the collective unconscious, right? So we have this idea of collective learning. So one might argue that
and critically, that information passes in invisible ways, especially over distance, at a certain time, at a certain point.
And imagine with the introduction of social media and AI, how the proliferation of information is going to change. But what do you think if we were able to reach 100th monkey status with the idea that homeopathy should be a respected medicine that has its place in the larger system? The way that we have to start doing that is from within, by respecting the medicine, by all learning, and that rising tide floats all boats, right? We need to do it together and not resist going back and saying we need to engage in best practices with what we're doing. And if we can get to that 100th monkey idea and we all do it together, I mean, there's no stopping this. Like, homeopathy then becomes a part of the conversation. Like, we know how well it works, but we're diluting it without succussing, I think. I'm afraid that was a repetition of my usual rant.
No, it's not. It was interesting, actually, because you're not ranting. And you're using somewhat different language. And I'm just listening to you and going, I agree with you 100%. There are challenges along the way. For me, for example, you and both of your position of leadership, my previous leadership of Achina met significant resistance to rising the tide.
It's shocking to me because it's like if we just help each other, we get there together, So if somebody says, well, I'm not going to change, then it pulls everybody down,
Well, that was my experience.
I found it sad when a student who decided to leave AHE said, I'd rather a program where I can just kind of podcast it.
Right.
Right? And I was like, oh my gosh. Well, I think she says on a podcast. I think, listening to podcasts is an incredible way to enhance learning and to add information. It's sort of a passing, it's a passive way. But literally it's one thing if somebody isn't going to practice. Okay, fair enough. Then learn, do whatever you want. But is that really going to help us to do what we need to do to make the changes in the system, to make systemic changes to actually help more and more people? I don't know.
What you got there?
I've got Wenda O'Reilly's Organon, the 6th edition, and with so many sticky notes and things in it. But I wanted to keep going from our conversation last week about symptoms. And it's kind of connected to where we started today, which is about learning something is like homeopathy is complex. There's a simple introductory part, and then there's sort of the complexity of the long-term implementation, right? So if we're thinking about it just from an Organon standpoint, aphorism 3, is basically the job description of the Organon. Very, very simply put, it says, know what's wrong with the client, with the patient, know what homeopathy, know what remedies sort of match that symptom picture, and understand how to apply according to principles. And then, by the way, remove all the obstacles. In other words, make sure that the lifestyle, and that all of the obstacles are removed and the exciting causes. Are you having a hot flash?
I think so.
You were sitting, Alastair has, if you were listening to the last episode, I think it was the last episode where we talked about Al having all the skin on his fingers removed through a gardening event. The saga continues because, the obstacles have not been removed. Anywho, if we're looking at sort of the learning, there's this way in which the Organon teaches us and chronic diseases teaches us, but it's also, there's something about the translation into contemporary practice that's really important. I love how one of the things I really got from my thesis was this way in which Hahnemann was, he in his life in the early to mid 19th century, he lived through this incredible time of changing scientific paradigms, and he sat in the brackish waters between sort of what we would now say is kind of holism and reductionism. I mean, that's just sort of one categorical way to look at it. And in that space, or from that space, he would say that his system, so the system of medicine known as homeopathy, was based on universal laws, the laws of nature. And he said the laws of nature don't change. Everything else changes, but the laws of nature don't change. Right? I just think that has profound impact on what we do. Because it means that, if we're going to look at it through the standpoint of an educational paradigm, that the homeopathy doesn't need to change. People say, well, how can homeopathy, it's a modality from the 19th century, how can it work with 21st century problems? It's like, oh, of course it does, because it's based on, universal laws. However, the decoder rings need to be updated. You need a systems upgrade so that you can take the contemporary language, right, and look through that in order to figure out how to solve a problem. What do you think about that?
I like it.
What do you like about it?
Well, I think that there's something which resonates between the very thing that we do, which is to restore health. We take people backwards. We're in the business of looking at a crime scene and taking someone, the state of health, chronic health, and taking them back to a time that they probably have forgotten or maybe remember, where they're in a better state of health. I like that. I like the idea of restoring. I like the idea of heading backwards to something that was there once. Yeah.
I love that. That's aphorism 1, the restoration of health.
Yeah, it is.
It's funny because sometimes we say healing is forgetting, right? But kind of the way that you're saying it is healing is remembering.
Oh, I think so.
I mean, right? So so in a way, there's the healing is forgetting.
I don't know about remembering. It's restoring. It is because those two things are not exclusive. I think we do forget when we're well, we're forgotten because we're whole.
Yeah, well, we
we're
don't
non-dual.
think about.
Yeah.
Kent says a man in health is not aware of his parts.
Exactly.
Right? I love that statement.
What about a woman?
Same. But Kent was a misogynist, so it's like,
Wow.
Oh, did I say that part out loud?
Well, you did.
I mean, we talked about Kent and his weird. I mean, that I shouldn't have said it. He's a product of his times, Maybe that's better said.
Yeah.
Okay, rewind, erase. Woot.
No.
Not a misogynist, a product of his times. But, he could not get away with what he would say.
Oh, no.
But, you also, women did their own pelvic exams in his time.
Right.
So, which is fine, because that was the 1970s, our bodies ourselves. Body autonomy. Okay, I was pointing to the Yasgur's Homeopathic Dictionary, wanting me to open it up to that section on symptoms.
I really want to go through...
Every one of them.
Well, no, not every one of them, but I just think that it's an extraordinary list.
Sure is.
So, symptoms, right? We say that, and so I'll contextualize.
Hang on, though, because you said something really interesting, because you were talking about the restoration of health. And
Yeah.
We didn't sort of finish this idea of healing is forgetting, healing is remembering, but there's a thing that people say when they come to the homeopath that you don't really get a chance to say to your doctor if you only have an 8-minute appointment and you've got a lot of things going on. But they often will say to us, I'm not myself. And when a person gets a good remedy, especially the first time, there is this way in which this restoration of health equals I'm myself again. And sometimes people will say, I don't know, I feel more like myself.
You know what they've... it's not universal, but I love it when clients come into the clinic for their follow-up and they say, how are you?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And you're going, oh, nice.
Yeah.
You know? And of course, it's not just being polite. What that is like, oh, my world view, my fingernail vision is now just expanded. I'm not within myself. I'm not, I've got a little bit of energy and hard drive to engage again in the world. That's always fun.
It really is.
Yeah.
This is, if we're talking about sort of how a homeopath who's been trained in long-term case management, right?
Yeah.
Part of that is your note-taking or your record keeping, right? And having this sort of archive of the evolution of a person's wellness journey, yeah? And, it's interesting when people will come back to us and say, well, they always say nothing happened. And then you go back to your notes and you say, well, what about, the migraine headaches you've had the last 10 years? Oh my gosh, I totally forgot. I haven't had a headache or whatever. But, and it's not always quite so black and white. But what happens is we have this, we have this record where we are really looking at the level of health. And so a person can be achieving a higher level of health and can still have some symptoms. I mean, you're living in as you call it, a skin bag.
What is a skin bag?
I don't know why I find that to be, it's a little bit gross to me, just the idea.
Really?
I mean, it's fine. You also say my body is my temple, so I
My
suppose
body.
Your body.
It's a sleeping bag, a skin bag. What else would you? How else would you describe this container?
I mean, I suppose, you know what, in my language, and maybe it's just because of being me, but
I don't know where
think
it
of
comes
it as
from.
energy and matter. And so I kind of think of it in those terms. I know, that's whatever, but
I'm interested because I have no recollection because it's so embedded. I have no idea who would have said that or if it's me or not.
yeah.
I mean, it could be
There were 99 monkeys before you saying it.
I don't know. It could be a Dzogchen thing or a Jeremy Sher thing or I don't know. I would have heard it along the way.
But what
Sheldon Kopp.
Sheldon keeps coming up. You're really into...
He was a brilliant writer.
Yeah. So going back, though, to what a homeopath...
All of God's children are lost, but some of them can play the piano.
Oh, my gosh.
It's a good one.
That is a good one.
Yeah.
I think I need more coffee. Keep up with you. The problem is that my thermos... Oh, that was just sludge. That's really not good.
Do you know what's really interesting, though, that you just reminded me of something? It's all about forgetting and remembering. Is that when you're an old bloke...
Like you? Oh, sorry. Did I say that out loud?
I think just as we evolve and things become so ingrained and so integrated, you forget about how that happened or where it began. my early traveling, like, from when I was 20, when I was traveling a lot.
When you hit the road.
When I hit the road, that those experiences, those conversations, when you're on the road.
You mean like with the people that you meet?
Yeah. And I suppose the widening perspective that happens, or for me anyway, when I left New Zealand and then it became somewhat more worldly, I have no idea. So to this day, I don't know. When I say something, I have no idea about the links. Those links back to those conversations, those books, the music, those experiences.
It's kind of like, I don't know if this connects, but you just made me think about how different books they're really meaningful at different places and points in life. And then when you go back and try to read them, then are they going to be the same? You reminded me of this book that when I started traveling, although our travels were different because you sort of upped and left for a long period of time, and I went and came back because I had a real job. Sorry.
Son, got a job?
That's just a little inside joke there. Anyway, but there was a book called Nothing to Declare. Memoirs of a Woman Traveling Alone.
Oh, wow.
And marry somebody. And I loved this woman's work at a time. Anyway, and then I spent a lot of time as a woman traveling alone. And then I read it again, and I was like, okay, well.
Yeah, whatever.
It's funny, but I loved that book at a point where I think I needed to experience something that I had not yet. Right? Anyway, why have we gotten so off track?
Because you are incapable of holding a line and just going.
Do you actually think that's true?
No, I don't actually.
I doth protest.
Yes.
I'm like a dog with a bone.
Yeah.
A distractible dog with a bone, however, but without an agenda.
Well, because, I want to get to these symptoms, but I'm also intrigued by what you just said because I'm thinking, if I was kind of a little bit aware of bookshelves in the 1970s.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you'd go to someone's house and you'd look and you'd see. There'd be these books like in the 70s, I'm Okay, You're Okay.
Oh, yeah.
You remember?
Was that Eric Fromm?
No.
Jonathan
Eric Fromm is
Livingston
Fear
Seagull?
from Freedom.
Oh, right.
Fear of Freedom. Then Fear from Freedom.
That's, yeah.
And then there was Carlos Castaneda.
Oh, of course. Which I learned about from Misha.
Right.
Did you? Or did you learn about it otherwise?
No,
I don't think I ever...
I found those books when I was at university.
Oh. That was brand new to me in my early studies of homeopathy with Misha.
And then, what was the other one? The Dice Man.
Just saw a reference to that the other day.
These books are not... No one knows these books anymore. In a typical classroom, you reference those books, people have no idea.
But I think this is important because what we're talking about is... And I want to go back to what I was trying to say about about tracking a person's case over time.
Right.
But I think it's also interesting in people's homeopathy journey because, we see students who get into studying and they think, oh my gosh, I was reading all of this material without context and making sort of assumptions about homeopathy and what to do without seeing this information in the larger context, whether it be the timing, the person's lineage. For example, we talk about we just mentioned Misha. Well, Misha, was a druid and comes with all this incredible esoteric influence into his work, right? Then you look at somebody like, some of the other British teachers who came through the lineage of the medical homeopathy or the material homeopathy, the people who never went above a 3C, or Compton Burnett, a master anatomist, disease has a seat, understanding the context of people's contributions to the body of literature is really super important so that you can see, it's just like talking about Kent. Right? I mean, he's a product of his time. And I think we see, as we take on new information, I've got my Organon sitting here, and one of the things that fell out of it was, it's scrap paper.
Can I paint a picture, folks? So, you know Wenda Brewster O'Reilly's big red book. So Denise's looks like a porcupine because it's got post-it notes, sticky notes, and then in addition to that, paper clips,
and then pieces of
and then
note cards
with random scribbles. Look at that! You got another post-it note there. And then out the back falls random dusty pieces of paper.
Notes. This was apparently, I was teaching a lecture on how remedies cure, aphorisms 22 to 49, 50 to 71, and 146 to 156.
Rock and roll.
Lot. That must have been a whole day workshop. Anyway, but on the back is...
a recipe.
No, on the back is Rajan Sankaran.
Uh-huh.
And it is just it's a copy of something I must have printed out. It looks like it was from a slide. And it says, the situation of Fossack, right away, I would be like, sorry, I wouldn't use that anymore. Because I have, in my learning, have moved away from situational analyses, prescribing a remedy or recommending a remedy based on someone's situational analysis. It just feels sort of whatever. Now, I have no idea if this is something that Sankaran would still say, oh yeah, I'm like totally into that language.
Have I told you that story? I wrote it in one of the books which I wrote. Can I interrupt?
You already did.
All right. So I said to, and it was a serious question because it's back in.
We just talked about this last week. You talked about the conversation you had with Rajan.
No, where I asked him about which books should students buy.
Oh, no, sorry.
No.
I was so willing to just jump in and say, you're repeating yourself.
No, I'm not.
No, you're not.
No.
Sorry.
So I went to a seminar with him and I arranged to interview him because I had to write a chapter in a book about his work. And then on top of that, I was thinking to myself, what do we get the students to buy? Right? Because by that time, so it's, he's 20 years into his publishing journey. So Spirit of Homeopathy, Substance of Homeopathy, Elements of... No, I've got it wrong already.
Soul of Homeopathy.
Soul of Remedies.
Or Soul of Remedies. But then later came
Plants,
the Elements one was the...
His dad, yeah. And so that's how I pitched it to him. And I said, so I've got a problem because I want students to know about the way that your thinking has evolved over time. And so, therefore, what would you recommend would be the book that students get? And I'm saying at the moment, buy them all. And he says, no, are you kidding?
Wait, you're kidding, for real?
No, he said, no. And I'm not even, because it's clear as a bell in my mind, he says, buy the other song. He said that would be the book because that's the landing place for my years of, outwardly publishing exploration. Because
sometimes we publish it's like what we're learning.
I know.
Oh.
I know, and sometimes I wish I hadn't. But I thought that was extraordinary. And anyway, the point is that he's evolving. Yeah. His thinking is evolving over time.
And this is the thing that, I really appreciate. I mean, I appreciate that about him in particular, but authors in general who are willing to critically evaluate prior work and say, I've come forward on my journey. And I mean, I like, when you find an author that you really like and then you read everything that they've written and you get back to the beginning and you're like, whoa.
Yeah, right.
Or sometimes the opposite can happen.
Do you know Alastair Gray?
We have all of his books in our bathroom on the back of the toilet.
Right. So he's, if you don't know, folks, he's a naughty Scottish writer.
He sure is. And it's spelled Alastair with a D.
With a D, yeah. And he wrote, the first time I became aware of his writings was this incredible book called 5 Letters from an Eastern Empire. And it's amazing. And then I thought, it's amazing, so I'll do that and I'll get everything else. And it's just, then there's a book called Something Leather. I think that kind of says enough.
Yeah.
And it just gets worse and worse from there.
I've tried to look through a few and I've...
No. Not your cup of tea.
Not so much.
No.
But go. Oh my God, we'll get to the symptoms probably next time.
I think next time.
But so what I was saying before, though, about following a case over time, right? So there's this evolutionary process that happens in the unfolding of a case with homeopathy, and there are patterns that you learn to track, and there are questions that you need to ask, right? And some of this, I find that Hahnemann's writings on chronic diseases and that very, deep exploration that he did, starting in 1816, working through to 1828, to rethink that sort of match it idea of a remedy, that he recognized that there was actually an unfolding process and that there's a logic to how a case unfolds. And one of the things that I love to show the students when we get into semesters 3 and 4 and we're looking at complex case management is, I and I'm sure you do this as well, like using case notes. So taking a case that you've worked with for 10, 15, 20 years, de-identifying it, obviously, and creating sort of this template for them to look at. And one of the exercises that I like to do is to have people look at a remedy list, right? So in the way that I keep my case notes, which is similar to what you do and probably a lot of homeopaths, which is you have a remedy history in the very beginning. So you can sort of get a capsule of the case by just looking at the remedies and the dates which they were recommended.
Yep.
And so one of the exercises that I love is to get students to look at a list of remedies and to tell me about that case.
Are you saying
time.
that this is really exciting because I don't think we've ever talked about this. So
I have many
you're saying
secrets. He just got a flush.
So
Yeah.
I think, are you saying, because I would describe it somewhat differently. So
course
I
you
would
would.
describe it that, here's the thing, folks. If you're in a clinical situation where someone is getting better, the remedies always get more boring.
No, I wouldn't say that.
Let me explain. So usually,
I might say the opposite.
because my experience is that the veratrums and the hyoscyamuses and the stramoniums and the
Those are
belladonnas,
acute remedies.
well, not all acute remedies.
Those are acute
And
remedies.
you always see them at the beginning of treatment.
Nah.
But as the client starts to get better and better, you head towards usually, the polycrests,
Yeah.
and definitely the minerals.
Yeah, but that's just acute chronic. But I'm saying a different thing. Okay. I know, but let me just say this and then we can go back to it. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah.
Not that there's any choice in the matter.
Yeah.
No, but this exercise, though, is a way of getting students to recognize that the unraveling of a case makes sense.
Right.
That it's not throwing remedies in hopes that you're going to give the one remedy that unlocks the mysteries and they levitate and the angels sing and their cellulite goes away and they always find a parking place.
And then move to Tibet.
And then they move to Tibet.
Yeah.
What happens is you look at, 5, 10, 15, 20 years of prescribing, and what you see, I think in some ways, we can go back to what you just described because I think that's really interesting. But what the point I try to make is that there's a pattern. So in other words, if you're looking at a case, the pattern might be seen through a miasmatic lens. So I have a case that I love to teach where when I'm teaching the psychotic miasm and I'm showing this case where this person was doing beautifully on antipsychotic remedies, and then when the remedy kind of peters out and I made a switch based on what seemed to be appropriate symptomology, but was a switch to the syphilitic miasm, she no longer had the response. So it teaches a few things. One is the unraveling pattern, right, in chronic disease, but it also shows that there's it within that there are different remedies. No, let me say this a different way. That there are remedies that have similar symptom pictures, but you might make a clinical decision based on where they are miasmatically at the moment. So in this particular case, this person needed to continue on their psychotic journey. That was still activated, and the eradication of that pattern in that moment had not happened. Switching to a different miasmatic profile was like, it's not going to be as effective. So that's one way to look at a list. Yeah. Another way would be to look at a case over time and to see that there are particular periods of time when a person might have acutes. So one of the cases that I teach, actually I love to teach this case, it's a salmon case, Oncorhynchus. It's a beautiful case with a dozen years or more of follow-up. And she did really well with the remedy salmon, Oncorhynchus. And then you see that she was annually having poison ivy. So you could see the acute remedies given for poison ivy. And then you see that one year she stopped having poison ivy anymore. And you also see that in the posology from when she first had poison ivy, which was like terrible enough that she would get steroid shots, that each year, once I found the remedy that worked well for her poison ivy, which if I remember correctly was Kali sulf, yeah? And I tried the usual Rostox, anacardium, and so forth, gave her some Kali sulf, and then you see the next year, start with Kali sulf, just a couple of doses, and the following year, no more poison ivy.
Nice.
That's like a great way to use just the remedy history to speak to, the evolution of a case.
Yep.
Do you ever do that?
No, never.
Ah,
Really
I
interesting.
highly recommend it.
Right.
But also you can see, so anyway, there are lots of things that you could see. But I totally agree with you about this idea that we move deeply into a more chronic picture. And as Hahnemann tells us in Chronic Diseases, where he says this new sort of way of understanding diseases for which an entirely new classification of remedies was required, primarily consisting of mineral remedies, especially with regards to psora, then you see that the plant remedies that are included in chronic diseases typically are plants for which there was botanical knowledge in their use for venereal diseases, like, for example, guacum, right, which was a plant remedy used to treat syphilis. So, but one thing that I would say is a little bit different is that as a case evolves, I think that sometimes when you give a little strange remedy, like you'll be going along with a case and then you realize there is this a little blip where you can see very clearly a remedy like, say, helium. Like I have that case of a woman who had that desire to shave her head, which is a very prominent symptom from the helium proving. And this woman randomly one day, like we're going about our merry way treating her case, and she says, I don't know if I've ever told you about this, but I have this bizarre thing. It's like, I love that. I sit up in my chair. Yes. Tell me more. But she felt sort of this almost like spiritual dirtiness related to a variety of things, but wanted to shave her head. She's like, I can see myself with, the number 3 in the clipper. And I gave her helium just based on that very clear indication, right? So that is, in some ways, as a case unfolds, it shows us those little places where you can sort of take the top off something. Do you find that as well? Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I love it when, that characteristic symptom just emerges. You see it coming, Amazing.
Yeah, totally. Wow.
We didn't go in any of the directions today that we spoke about.
Not even a little
Not more
bit.
than an hour ago.
We didn't.
What are we gonna label this one?
There's a reason why home dentistry never took off. I just love that phrase. And, and I have to say, I really, I apologize to those who don't want to hear about the things that we struggle with as a 230-year-old emerging profession, trying to really find the level, have the water reach its highest level. And I know that those are uncomfortable conversations, and I know that can be difficult. So I apologize for those who are like, "Shut up, Denise. I'm tired of hearing you say that. Can you get to the other stuff?" I will do my best. But as a person who engages in the advocacy conversations in the profession, I have to say that it's like having an itch that needs to be scratched, and I just want people to understand that. So I while I apologize for it, I also really appreciate that at some point there'll be the 100th monkey, where one of the people who felt like home spleen surgery was totally fine, and treating sepsis and treating all these and sort of being very liberal with their with their home prescribing, at some point that 100th monkey concept is going to kick in and people are going to say, you know what, I want to learn more so that I can do this safely, or I'm going to keep doing all the home things that I do that are within the realm of best practices, and I'm going to work with somebody who's really worked their tail off to learn how to do this well. And that if we do that together, we move the profession forward, and then we can make real systemic change. So I just hope that it's taken in that spirit.
Love it.
Because I catch a lot of crap on the downside of this. Oh, well.
Oh, well.
I can't seem to stop myself from talking about it, so I guess I'm asking for it. Anyway.
That's it.
That's it. We were supposed to have a special guest today. And they've got a busy schedule.
Yep.
But soon.
Soon. In a couple of weeks.
Couple weeks.
Yep.
All right.
Cool.
Hey, thanks for listening. Stay strange, rare, and peculiar, people.
AHE is changing the face of homeopathy education by raising the bar through rigorous academics and unparalleled clinical training delivered live through the soulful use of cutting-edge technology. AHE prepares its students to become fully rounded homeopathic practitioners from anywhere in the world. Apply today and ask about the early enrollment discount at ahe.online.